The Good Morning Britain studio had never opened quite like this before. It was a morning that would be replayed, dissected, and debated for years to come. The breakfast sofa, usually a place of gentle celebrity promotion and soft news, carried tension that felt different from the start. Something electric, something unresolved, something that had been building long before the cameras started rolling. Meghan Markle sat between Susanna Reid and Ed Balls. The Duchess of Sussex, a woman who had navigated royal protocol, international media storms, and the relentless machinery of global fame, found herself in a position she had perhaps not anticipated. Alone. No Harry beside her. No carefully choreographed joint appearance. Just Meghan, a glass of water, and two presenters who had a job to do. The arrangement itself had generated headlines before a single question was asked. What was meant to be a family reunion? A chance to bridge divides that had grown wider than anyone could have predicted, had instead become something far more complicated. And Susanna Reid had spent over a decade extracting truth from people who were determined to avoid it. The interview began with pleasantries, the usual breakfast television warmth, handshakes that felt polished rather than personal, cameras warming up, the studio lights casting their unforgiving glow on every expression, every flicker of discomfort, every pause that lasted a beat too long. Meghan, welcome to Good Morning Britain. Thank you for having me. The words were cordial, professional, the kind of exchange that had played out on this very sofa thousands of times before. But something was different this morning. Susanna Reid had reviewed her notes. She had prepared for this conversation with the precision of someone who understood that this interview mattered, not because of celebrity, but because of context. The timing, the contradictions, the questions that had been swirling through British media for days before Meghan even sat down. The trip to the UK. Susanna began, her tone calm but the subtext unmistakable. You're here without Harry. You're here without the children. Given the security arrangements and the reports that have been circulating, can you help us understand why you came alone? It was a reasonable question. It was also the question Meghan had been hoping wouldn't come. What happened next would dominate British breakfast conversation for the rest of the week. The initial pleasantries faded. The studio atmosphere shifted, the kind of shift that technicians feel before something significant happens. A collective intake of breath. A stillness that settled over the set. Meghan's expression remained composed. But there was something in the careful way she chose her words that suggested she was navigating terrain she hadn't fully prepared for. I had personal engagements requiring my presence. Personal engagements, Susanna repeated, her interviewer's instinct sharpening. Significant enough to travel without your family during what was supposed to be a reunion trip? That seems like a substantial shift from the original plan. The air in the studio grew thinner. Meghan offered flexibility as her explanation. Circumstances required flexibility, she said. The kind of corporate answer designed to close doors rather than open them. But Susanna Reid wasn't in the business of accepting closed doors. Circumstances like the Home Office declining full police protection outside royal properties, Susanna pressed. That's rather specific, not general flexibility. Why did the children ultimately stay behind? The question hung in the air like smoke. Susanna Reid's technique was clinical in its effectiveness. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward aggressively. She simply asked direct questions and waited for answers that never quite came. Security decisions are made with their well-being as priority. Then why are you here without that same protection consideration applying to yourself? Susanna asked. The logic was inescapable. If security was inadequate for the children, what was different about Meghan's own safety calculation? Meghan's hands moved toward her water glass. A small gesture, almost invisible, but the cameras caught everything. Adult security needs differ from children's requirements. They differ certainly, Susanna said, her tone measured but implacable. But you're still choosing to be here in a country where your own family apparently couldn't be adequately protected. That still seems like a decision worth explaining more fully than you have. This was the Susanna Reid that had built a decade-long career on breakfast television. patient, relentless, unwilling to let deflection pass as answer. Then came the question that would make headlines. The Kris Jenner birthday party. There were reports, Susanna explained, that Meghan had attended the celebrity event in Los Angeles while Harry and the children remained elsewhere. The timing raised questions that demanded answers. Is that accurate? Susanna asked, her voice calm but carrying the weight of genuine curiosity. And if so, why prioritize that over remaining with your family during this complicated period? Meghan's composure flickered, a micro-expression that lasted perhaps a second. But in the unforgiving light of live television, a second was all it took. I maintain various friendships internationally. Kris Jenner specifically, though, Susanna pressed. That's rather notable timing. A celebrity birthday party during a trip that was originally about family reconciliation. Especially given your children ultimately couldn't join due to security concerns. The studio was silent. My schedule involves multiple commitments. Multiple commitments that apparently outweighed staying with your family, Susanna said. Help me understand that prioritization. The tension in the studio was now visible, not just in the rigid set of Meghan's shoulders, or in the careful way Susanna held her notepad, but in the space between them, the charged air that seemed to crackle with something unresolved. You're mischaracterizing a complex situation. Then help me understand the actual complexity, Susanna said, her tone still professional, but her words carrying unmistakable pressure. Because from outside this looks like choosing a celebrity social event over family reconciliation efforts. What Susanna was doing with surgical precision was revealing the gap between narrative and reality. The narrative was careful, measured, designed to present a picture of familial warmth and deliberate choices. But the reality, visible in Meghan's increasingly tight responses, was something else entirely. Friendships require maintenance regardless of other circumstances. Even during a week when your own children are absent because security couldn't be arranged, Susanna said, that timing still seems worth addressing more directly than you have so far. Harry's separate arrival came next. He arrived days before you, Susanna noted. That's unusual for what was billed as a family trip. What actually happened with the original travel plans? This was the moment when the interview shifted from uncomfortable to confrontational. Logistics required separate arrangements. Logistics, Susanna repeated. Or did the security situation actually change your plans midway through? Reports suggest the police protection offer only covered royal properties, not the full visit. Is that why the children stayed in America? Meghan's answers became shorter, more guarded. Security decisions involve many factors. That's not actually answering my question, Susanna said. The directness was breathtaking in its clarity. Did inadequate security protections specifically cause your children to remain behind while you traveled? Meghan reached for her water again. I won't discuss specific security details publicly. The pattern was now unmistakable. Every question met with deflection. Every deflection met with another question. Susanna Reid was doing what she did best, refusing to let evasion become acceptable. You've discussed security extensively in previous interviews, court proceedings, documentaries, Susanna pointed out. Why is this specific situation suddenly off limits? Ongoing security matters require discretion. Discretion that seems selectively applied whenever questions become specific rather than general, Susanna said. The observation hung in the air, undeniable in its accuracy. That pattern itself is worth noting. Meghan's composure was cracking. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would be visible to someone watching casually. But the trained eye could see it. The slight tightness around her eyes, the way her responses became more clipped, the growing tension in her posture. She was being pressed in ways she had perhaps not anticipated. Then came the divorce rumors. Given you're here without Harry, without your children, under circumstances that seem increasingly complicated, Susanna said, her voice gentle but her words anything but. What's your response to the ongoing reports? Tabloid speculation without foundation. Speculation that gains more traction given your current circumstances, Susanna said. Separate travel, absent children, prioritizing a celebrity party over family time. Does any of that actually support your denial? The question was devastating in its simplicity. Meghan's response was instinctive, defensive, the kind of answer that felt practiced rather than authentic. Every choice I make gets media scrutiny disproportionate to its actual meaning. Or perhaps the scrutiny exists because the choices themselves raise legitimate questions, Susanna countered. What would you say to people who see this specific trip as evidence supporting the divorce speculation rather than contradicting it? The trap was perfectly set. It wasn't a trap of malice or agenda. It was a trap of logic, the inescapable conclusion of choices that had been made, reported, and now questioned. I'd say they're drawing unfounded conclusions. Unfounded based on what alternative explanation? Susanna asked. You still haven't actually provided one for why this trip looks so different from the family reunion originally announced. Let me ask directly, Susanna said, her tone shifting to something even more precise. Is your marriage currently stable given everything about this trip specifically? The question was direct, unambiguous, the kind of question that demanded either a definitive answer or revealed the absence of one. My marriage remains solid. Solid marriages don't typically involve separate international travel, absent children, and attendance at celebrity parties instead of remaining together during complicated circumstances, Susanna said. Can you address that contradiction directly? Meghan's response was the most revealing moment of the entire interview. You're drawing conclusions from limited information. I'm asking you to provide the fuller information that would actually resolve these questions, Susanna said. So far, you've offered generalities rather than specifics. There was a moment when Ed Balls interjected gently, an attempt, perhaps, to redirect the conversation toward something more constructive. But Susanna was not finished. These are legitimate questions Britain deserves answers to, she said, especially given how much public interest and resources have gone into planning this visit. I don't owe anyone a detailed accounting of my marriage. You don't owe details, Susanna agreed. No. But you chose this platform, this interview, this conversation. Vague denial without any actual substance doesn't resolve legitimate public questions. It simply confirms there's something specific being avoided. The observation was clinical in its accuracy, and Meghan knew it. The final pivot came with Thomas Markle.
Susanna shifted terrain, but maintint directness.
Given the focus on family reconciliation with Harry's side, she asked, had Meghan's own father come up during this visit? The change in Meghan's expression was instantaneous. Closed, guarded. The emotional walls that had been visible but permeable became suddenly impenetrable. My relationship with my father remains private. Private? Yet you're specifically here for family-related purposes, according to official narratives. Doesn't that make his continued absence from any reconciliation efforts rather notable? Different family relationships require different approaches. Different how specifically? Susanna pressed. He's elderly. He's had serious health complications. He's publicly pleading for reconciliation. Yet, you're prioritizing time with a reality television personality instead. That comparison seems worth addressing directly. Meghan's composure cracked further. You're conflating separate issues that have nothing to do with each other. They're connected by the theme of this entire trip, family reconciliation, Susanna said. If that's genuinely the priority, his continued absence from any effort seems relevant, not separate. I don't have to justify every personal choice to a television audience, Meghan said. The words came out sharper than perhaps intended. You're a public figure who specifically chose this trip, this platform, this conversation, Susanna said. Justification isn't unreasonable when your choices directly involve matters of significant public interest. Security arrangements, family relationships, marital stability. This entire interview has become an interrogation. This interview has become direct questioning about legitimate public interest topics you've chosen to be part of by accepting this appearance. Susanna said. That's not interrogation. That's basic accountability journalism. The distinction was crucial. Susanna Reid was not attacking Meghan Markle. She was simply refusing to accept evasion as acceptable. Accountability journalism. The phrase would be repeated endlessly in the days that followed. I came here to discuss meaningful engagement, not have my life picked apart. Meaningful engagement includes addressing the actual circumstances surrounding your visit, rather than only the parts that present favorably, Susanna said. So far, every difficult topic has received deflection rather than substance. I came here expecting fair treatment. This is fair treatment, Susanna said. Fair means asking direct questions about your own choices and expecting actual answers rather than vague deflection. You've provided almost nothing specific about any of the genuinely newsworthy elements of this particular visit. The tension was unbearable. Everything the camera captured, the set, the lights, the water glass Meghan had reached for repeatedly, became evidence of what was happening. Every question has felt hostile from the start. Every question has been direct about publicly relevant circumstances you've created through your own choices this week, Susanna said. If directness feels hostile, that discomfort exists in the actual situation, not in my questioning of it. Then it happened. I won't continue sitting here being attacked, Meghan said, grabbing her purse. You're not being attacked, Susanna said. You're being asked to explain decisions that carry genuine public interest. Why your children aren't here. Why you're attending celebrity events instead of remaining with family. Whether your marriage is actually stable given all these circumstances. Those aren't personal attacks. They're the exact questions this situation demands. Meghan moved toward the exit. You've been completely unprofessional. Susanna's response was calm, measured, final. Unprofessional would be inventing claims, she said. Everything I've asked traces back to documented, reported circumstances surrounding your own trip. The unprofessional element here is walking away from direct questions about your own choices rather than actually addressing them. Meghan paused at the studio door. History will remember how unfairly I was treated today. History will remember someone who couldn't explain basic decisions about her own well-documented trip on live breakfast television, Susanna said. That's not unfair treatment. That's simply accountability you weren't prepared to provide. Meghan left. The studio fell into a brief, stunned silence. The kind of silence that follows something unexpected. The moment when everyone realizes that what just happened wasn't normal. Ed Balls spoke first. Well, that wasn't quite the segment we planned. Susanna turned to address the camera directly. Her expression was composed, but there was something in her eyes, not triumph exactly. More like the satisfaction of having done her job thoroughly. I want to be clear about what just happened, she said. Every question I asked was legitimate, directly relevant to documented circumstances surrounding her own trip this week. The security situation, the absent children, the celebrity party attendance, the marriage questions. These aren't invented controversies. They're existing public questions deserving direct answers. She paused. What we witnessed instead was someone unable to engage with reasonable scrutiny about decisions she herself made. That's revealing in itself. She straightened in her chair. We've had guests facing genuine scandals stay and address difficult topics directly. She couldn't handle straightforward questions about her own choices this week. The footage aired that morning. ITV made no edits. The clips that spread captured the confrontation in its entirety. The rising tension, the increasingly clipped responses, the moment when Meghan stood up and walked away. If security wasn't adequate for the children, what's different about your own safety calculation? That's not actually answering my question. Solid marriages don't typically involve separate international travel, absent children, and attendance at celebrity parties instead of remaining together. That comparison seems worth addressing directly. That's not interrogation. That's basic accountability journalism. History will remember someone who couldn't explain basic decisions about her own well-documented trip. The clips dominated social media. News outlets led with the confrontation. Breakfast conversations across Britain turned to what had happened on Good Morning Britain. Meghan's team released a statement calling the interview an ambush characterized by hostile questioning that ignored the complexity of the security situation entirely. Susanna addressed the criticism the following day. Ambush suggests deception about format or intent, she said. Everyone appearing on Good Morning Britain understands we ask direct questions about relevant public matters. Every topic discussed, the security arrangements, the absent children, the Kris Jenner event, the marriage speculation, was already publicly reported. I simply asked her to address them directly. She added, we've interviewed people facing genuine political crises who managed to stay and engage honestly. Someone couldn't handle 15 minutes of direct questions about her own trip. That contrast speaks for itself. For Susanna Reid, the interview became another demonstration of what over a decade of hosting British breakfast television had taught her. The ability to maintain composure and precision while asking questions that mattered, regardless of the guest's discomfort. The patience to wait through deflection until the unavoidable moment arrived. The clarity to recognize when someone was trying to avoid accountability. For Meghan Markle, the interview was particularly damaging given the timing. This wasn't distant tabloid speculation. It was direct questioning about choices made that very week. Choices already generating headlines before she'd even sat down. Being unable to navigate straightforward questions from Susanna Reid, walking out on live morning television, the images would linger far longer than any carefully crafted press statement. It exposed contradictions no publicist could fully manage afterward. The gap between narrative and accountability had been revealed in high definition. But for the millions watching their breakfast television that morning, something else emerged. The contrast between Susanna's calm, persistent professionalism and Meghan's escalating discomfort with basic accountability told its own story. Susanna asked why the children stayed behind. Meghan deflected into generalities. Susanna asked about the Kris Jenner party. Meghan minimized the timing. Susanna asked her to reconcile the marriage denial with the week's actual events. Meghan walked out entirely. And in that departure, in that inability to simply answer direct questions about her own very recent, very public choices, everything anyone needed to know about the gap between narrative and reality became impossible to ignore. Some people can handle direct questions with grace. Others prove they have no genuine answers at all. Susanna offered straightforward professional journalism. Meghan couldn't withstand it. British breakfast television had asked the questions Britain actually wanted answered. Meghan chose departure over honesty. That's the whole story. Over a decade of British breakfast television, direct questions about a trip that was making headlines that very week, and she couldn't handle 15 minutes of accountability about her own choices. What does that tell you about the difference between narrative and truth? More directness, more clarity, more of what a decade of breakfast television teaches you about separating narrative from reality. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. Drop a like. If you want more content that recognizes when directness reveals what deflection couldn't, stay with us. Good Morning Britain continues, as it always does, asking the questions that matter. Whether anyone is prepared to answer them.